Starting in the mid-1970s, there was a wave of European electronic music that brought new sounds and new possibilities. This is the wave that underlies the story in this episode of Cassette Culture. The story of Colin Potter and Integrated Circuit Records. As well as the artists featured in this episode, you'll hear the voices of me, Martin Franklin, and Jerry Kranitz. This is Cassette Culture.
It's a common thing with people of my vintage that the theme music to the Doctor Who TV series was heavily electronic, and the incidental sounds and music that gave me an interest from when I was basically an early teenager. And then I started building electronic circuits and things, because in those days it was virtually impossible to get any equipment. I'd basically just been soldering together fuzz boxes and simple oscillators.
The BBC Radiophonic Workshop was founded in 1958 and became known for its pioneering work in electronic music, creating incidental music for BBC TV shows. Hosting the talents of Delia Derbyshire, Daphne Oram, Paddy Kingsland and Brian Hodgson, they inspired a generation of viewers with Doctor Who and other TV shows to become curious about how these abstract sounds were made. This included Colin Potter, soon to be known as a musician and founder of Integrated Circuit Records.
I ended up at York University, and amazingly they had an EMS Synthi A briefcase synthesizer. They got a grant for it. In those days, it cost as much as a car or something. It was really expensive, but they had this thing, and you were allowed to borrow it. And then suddenly, this synthesizer was there in front of me, and it taught me how that type of synthesis worked and how to make noises, and noises that you could only imagine up to that point, which was like heaven. You know, it was like suddenly I could do these things that were in my head.
This one's for comfort and this one's for pain. This one's adjusted and this one's insane. This one is happy and this one is sad. Everything's simple, we are so glad, so glad.
Punk thing started, and it became possible to do things yourself. So I made crude experiments with basic equipment and just stuck them on cassettes. And a little network came about through music papers, fanzines, so that people got to know each other. They exchanged tapes, they bought each other's tapes. In my case, I started selling my own tapes on a crude mail order basis. And that kind of expanded. Everything just kept gradually growing. I was contacted by a guy from not all that far away, and a couple of guys from London. And we decided to have a go at doing something. So they came up to the village where I live. We just had a day's recording trying to do stuff, but it didn't gel. The other two guys were a lot more fun and a lot more interesting, but nothing was produced of any merit. But they, interestingly enough, went on to become the door and the window. They were a duo who did quite a lot of stuff and became kind of notorious down in London. But for me, one of the biggest, I would say, perhaps inspirations was the guys who were the Instant Automatons. And they did various compilations with lots of people from that era on it. And that, in a way, then connected, people started connecting with each other. And, it just sort of snowballed on from there. And we were in touch for years and years. They even recorded a few things at my place. Because by then I had a little 4-track studio.
He was very heavily involved in the whole electronic music underground kind of scene. And he's very prolific. He had his own home recording studio where he lived in York. And we actually went up there once to record a few tracks. It was before Protag had actually set up his own recording studio. And I think he got quite a few ideas of how to set the whole thing up from visiting Colin, yeah.
Soon after, ICR launched, based in the north of England, with the first collaborative vinyl LP release, ICR 001. We couldn't agree on a title. With tracks by Colin, the Instant Automatons, the Digital Dinosaurs, Philip Johnson, Londoners, the 012, and Those Little Aliens. The musical identity of Flow Motion fanzine creators Gordon Hope and Ian Dobson.
But the thing that came after that was I founded my record label, ICR, because this was another thing that we did where we said, okay, let's make a compilation record, one step up in quality from a cassette, and also more likely to sell in shops and things like that. We get in touch with various people and say, are you interested in being on a compilation LP? You've got 3 minutes. It'll cost you something like £50. So it was a cooperative effort. Everybody paid for their slots. That paid for the pressing. And they, in turn, each of them would get, 10, 15 copies. I can't remember how many. And the rest would sell through distribution. So I think it was one of their tracks, if not two of their tracks on that LP. They recorded it in my studio near York. But it just kind of kept growing. The second one was called Flow Motion, and it had some, reasonably well-known people on it. Chris and Cozy were on it, legendary Pink Dots, David Jackman, Ian Boddy, Colin Margot, various other people. And that sold so well, we got 500 pressed that we had to get it repressed. I did it in conjunction with the guys who ran Flow Motion magazine, which was a fanzine run by two guys in Leeds, Gordon Hope and Ian Dobson. They kind of, shall we say, had a bit more influence. So people who were reasonably successful at the time, especially people like Chris and Crosby, perhaps, and the Pink Dots, were willing to be on it.
Guided by Colin's background in electronic music and awareness of European influences, ICR began to outline a unique space among underground labels of the early 80s.
There was another area of music that was primarily propagated on cassette, which was more pure electronic music. I was always very interested in that, as well as the wacky stuff, the experimental stuff. There was the whole German electronic music scene and alternative rock scene. And I did a tape for there was a great fanzine called Mirage that was run by Martin Reed. And he started up a little tape label with various people on it. all, like I said, generally in the what they call cosmic music vein, like people like Carl Matthews, Paul Nagel, various people from other European countries, Ian Boddy, Mark Shreve. So I did a tape with him called The Ghost Office. And then the second thing I did on ICR was a tape of my own called The Sign.
Through his connection with Deleted Records, a fledgling designer got in touch with ICR, and Jonathan Coleclough was set to become the house designer and later musical collaborator.
The very first cassette Colin sent me, I looked at it at the sleeve and thought, I could do better than that. So I did. I redrew the sleeve and sent it back to him and said, why don't you use this sleeve instead of the one you sent me? And, it was very arrogant of me and quite cheeky, but he went, oh, yeah, it is better. And I thought, oh, good. So he used that. From then on, he asked, oh, will you do some more sleeves for me? And it became a regular thing that I did. So at first, I was just drawing them in pen on a bit of paper. But after a while, I got access to some letterpress printing equipment. And I was able to literally typeset by hand some of the covers in metal type. I mean, I would print one copy and I'd make artwork and he would photocopy the sleeve. So I wasn't hand printing every sleeve, but I was able to do some quite interesting use of type that way. And I was able to illustrate covers as well. I had a really good time doing those. He would send me the music, so I'd hear it. And then I working from the title and from the music that I'd heard, I would try and make something that I thought was appropriate. A lot of it was electronic-based, some of it quite rhythmic. They were more people who I felt had heard some of the kind of French and German electronic music of the 70s. And there was a contrast to that. The work of Paul Kelday, which he was a supporter of, that was much more abstract, non-rhythmic, quite noisy music. The other musician whose work Colin supported, who I really liked, was Carl Matthews. He obviously had this influence of 70s French and German electronic music, but he took it somewhere different, it felt to me. He was doing something unique and of his own.
Also, in the early 80s, because I was selling my tapes and I knew a lot of labels, I thought, why don't I do tape copy? Which was another way that I got involved with a lot of people in the scene. I used to duplicate the tapes for ICR, but various of the other small labels that were around at the time. So I ended up spending a lot of time just copying tapes. I mean, I made a little bit of money out of the cassette duplication, but that was like the money I made managed to pay for the machines, which meant I could copy my own tapes. The people on ICR really economically.
ICR's tape duplication service was about to host a customer who not only released one of the decade's defining releases, but would also lead to a number of career-changing connections. Here's Gary Levermore of Third Mind Tapes.
Well, it's interesting because when volumes 1 and 2 of Rising from the Red Sand were duplicated, initially there were 250 sets made. It was Colin that duplicated them. But then there were so many more sets duplicated that I would then, me, my sister, one or two of my sister's friends would literally spend our evenings listening to records and, taking off these stickers, cutting them to size with a pair of scissors and sticking them on the cassettes. In between volumes 1 and 2 of Red Sand, which were TMT04 and TMT05, volumes 3, 4, 5 were TMT 13, 14 and 15. So 6 was Nutrition Cassette, 7 was Portion Control, 8 was the legendary Pink Dots, 9 was a compilation that actually Colin was on called Visions. He definitely sent me a couple of cassettes of his music, and I picked a track from one of those cassettes to go on to volumes 3, 4, 5 of Red Sand. So yeah, I was very well aware of him as an artist.
By then, he was already working with Steve Stapleton from Nurse with Wound, and I'd talked to him about the process that he worked up with Steve, and it sounded like there was a lot of Colin being free to use his own imagination and his own ideas when he was working with Steve. And Steve would say, no, I don't like that, or, oh yeah, that's good, do more of that. And it wasn't always done with them in the same room. Sometimes Steve would come over, visit Colin, do some work, go back home to Ireland, and Colin would continue to work on the music. This was when he was in the studio in a water tower, where he was at the very top of the water tower. But in terms of the processing, every effects unit that he ever got vastly increased the palette of what he could do with his music. So everyone was really valuable. And I think he's never left that kind of mindset. So he just keeps them all, as far as I can see. He's got racks and racks of rack equipment. He's got loads of foot pedals. In his current studio, he's got one long shelf with foot pedals 2 deep in places.
So you were pretty heavily involved in engineering for others too, weren't you?
Partly through the cassette duplication thing, getting to know people like Current 93, David Tibet. They found out I had a proper studio where they could record things that were unusual, shall we say. Yeah, because some of the things people brought in to do A normal engineer would have basically said, there's something wrong there. You don't want to do that, or basically, I'm not going to record that. It's horrendous. Whereas I'm be willing to let anybody do whatever they wanted, as long as it didn't hurt themselves or the equipment. And also I had quite a lot of audit equipment as well. I had the standard, by then it was a 16-track studio, and I had all the, the standard equipment you needed. But then I had a lot of weird stuff as well. And sometimes when it came to mixing, I would, suggest things or say, what about doing this to the sound or that? I worked with initially David Tibet from Current 93, and at that stage it was just recording or mixing one of his albums. But as it was going along, I just, I would start fiddling and put some effect on something to change it. Because people like David and Steven Stapleton in particular was very open to experimentation. They'd find that interesting. I guess it wasn't just that it was a place where they could go and record. They'd also get some other kind of input, which might send something off in a different direction. But then with Steve, he realized I was putting, shall we say, an artistic input into it. And suddenly I found I was a member of Nurse Whitburn, which was a great honor, because they're a legendary band. And suddenly I found, rather than just mixing and adding a few effects, I was saying, okay, we can do this with this. And Steve got to know the way I worked and said, what can you do to this? Or can you do this to make it different? And yeah, it kind of grew from there. Sometimes I would add something specific from outside, but in most cases it's doing something with what we have, I mean, the classic example of that was the ended up in the Rock and Roll Station LP by Nurse. Because at that time, Steve used to live in Ireland, so he couldn't come to the studio particularly often. So he would just leave me with the material and say, just do a lot of mixes of that or remixes of that. And he was an expert then of putting things together at the other end. So I'd send him loads of variations on a thing, and he would then piece it together at his end to produce the final product, which I love working that way, to be left alone to do weird stuff and then give it to someone else to make it even stranger or better, shall we say, is for me, it's a nice way of working.
I think probably on your Bandcamp page that there was a spell a few years ago where you reissued a lot of your albums on cassette.
It goes in full circle. It was a very strange situation, that. When I moved down to London, a label got in touch with me and said, we want to reissue one of your old tapes on vinyl. So, I agreed to it. And then another label in London did the same, and another album came out. But the first guy alerted me to Cassette Store Day, which was the equivalent of Record Store Day. And he said, why don't you reissue some of your old cassettes on cassette? So he persuaded me, and I did a run of, I think it was 50 as a set of the... I didn't want to do the very early ones because the very early ones had music on it, which was nothing like I do now. So I thought I did the later ones, which were closer to what I do. They sold out really quickly. A company in Britain, a distributor called Boomcat, bought loads of them, raved about it. And they sold out in a couple of days or something. And they said, for God's sake, get some more. So I think I got another 50 done. I was just astonished because they're quite nice artifacts, cassettes. But the same thing happened the following year for cassettes, don't they? I did the other remaining early tapes of the set. And yeah, they sold really well. Compared to, you know, I look on Discogs sometimes, the prices people pay for some of the early tapes, it's quite depressing because we couldn't give them away at one point. And now they're worth like 25, 30 pounds or something.
The ICR label is still running and releasing music, notching up catalogue number ICR 109 at the time of recording in 2025. Colin's original solo cassette releases have recently benefited from reappraisal, with the focus of time identifying his pioneering role in promoting and developing abstract electronic music over the last 45 years. In this episode, you heard the voices of me, Martin Franklin, with Jerry Kranitz, Colin Potter, Mark Lancaster, Jonathan Coleclough, and Gary Levermore. Music in this episode was Off the Graph by Colin Potter from The Ghost Office on Mirage. We Are So Glad by Colin Potter from We Couldn't Agree on a Title. The Number One Entertainer by The Door and the Window on FO Records. Invertebrates by the Instant Automatons and Sentimental by Those Little Aliens, both from We Couldn't Agree on a Title. Ismalar by Those Little Aliens from the Flow Motion compilation on ICR. Power by Colin Potter from The Scythe. Harmless Thought by Carl Matthew from the Integration compilation on ICR. 1 Million Blades of Grass by Colin Potter from the Visions compilation on Third Mind. The Self-Sufficient Sexual Shoe by Nurse with Wound from the Rock and Roll Station album on United Dairies. As Above, So Below by Carl Matthews from the Flow Motion compilation.